This episode is proudly sponsored by Hooves and Paws, with thousands of trusted and hand-picked products for horses, dogs, and cats, and the kind of exceptional customer service you just don't see very often these days. You don't need to shop anywhere else. Go to hoovesandpaws.com/horseperson to snag your 15% off discount. And thank you for supporting our sponsors. Welcome to Horseperson. I'm Caroline Culbertson.
And I'm Beth Bears. If you've ever felt something in your chest watching a horse on screen, like that's it, that connection, that feeling you can't quite explain, there's a very good chance that feeling was shaped by today's guest.
For nearly 2 decades, Amber Marshall has been the face of horses for millions of people around the world through her show, Heartland. And whether you grew up riding every day or you've never touched a horse in your life, that show has had a way of pulling people into the horse-human relationship. Amber isn't just an actress playing a role. She's a true horse person. She was a horse person before she was an actor. So she is somebody who understands that quiet, unspoken language between horse and human, and also the responsibility that comes with representing that on a global stage.
In this episode, we go far beyond the screen. We talk about what Heartland gets right and where reality and storytelling have to meet in the middle. We get into the difference between the romanticized version of horses and the real, sometimes messy, always meaningful experience of living with them every day. And Amber shares how horses have grounded her through a career that at times asks her to be anything but her authentic self.
We also talk about identity, what it looks like to hold 2 passions at once, and how in Amber's case, both horses and acting didn't compete, they really shaped each other. And maybe most importantly, this conversation reminds us why so many of us are here in the first place, why we want to do this. And that's because horses give us something rare in this world.
So whether you're a lifelong rider, a Heartland fan, or someone who's just curious about that connection we're all chasing, this episode is really going to hit home. So let's get into it.
Amber, because of Heartland, you have spent 2 decades as the face of horses to so many people. And there's a responsibility that comes with that because for a lot of people just in the general public, that show is their understanding of horses and the horse world. How have you made decisions around how you would show up both on the show and in the world, knowing that you had that responsibility?
Wow. First off, great question to open with. Holy.
Let's get in there.
So much.
I do believe that when you're around horses, you have to bring your authentic self. But that's also what you have to do as an actor. And I think that growing up both simultaneously with horses in my life and being a child actor, I started acting when I was 12. I started riding when I was 5. So I understood that just unwritten language between horses and humans. And I do believe that that helped with my subtleties of acting. And it's all those little tiny things that you don't necessarily pick up on or you don't know that they're happening in the moment. But I believe that good horse people understand body language better than anyone. And they can use that to their advantage when reading a situation, reading a room, whether it be with humans or animals. And so for me, getting into a television show where I was working with horses, but I was also doing a job where I was pretending. So this is a whole different element of what the horse world usually is, because you don't want to pretend in front of your horse. You want to be your authentic self. You want to be true to them. You want to just let all the emotions out on the table and then decide where to go from there. But when you're working in film, all of a sudden you have a script that you have to deal with. And even though you might be feeling so happy and content and at peace inside, well, all of a sudden the script tells you to yell and scream at this horse and put all your energy into this horse. And that's very confusing to them. And so I do think that the world of Heartland was created with the magic of horses, and people who understand and know horses feel that right away. But I think that there's also something that captivates those who have never had the experience to be around horses. And there's something that you just can't put on paper. It's something that you just feel through the screen, you feel through just the visual and the impact of that horse connecting with someone on screen. It makes you feel like you can do that too. And I do believe that Heartland has brought a whole new horse audience into the world where they say, you know what? I'm inspired to go out and just have that connection myself, feel that presence of a horse.
Mhm.
And I think that's incredible. As a horse person myself, anytime I can inspire someone to go out and experience that horse human connection or that connection with any animal, I I definitely am all aboard for that.
Do you feel more like a horse person who became an actor or an actor who happens to ride?
Oh, geez, another good question. I think ultimately I always have had both in my heart. From a very young age, I started riding. I loved horses. I was around horses. I started leasing a pony at the age of 5, Tony the pony, and I had
Oh.
such an incredible experience with him. And he was so great and such a good kids confidence builder. And I was instantly hooked. But at the same time, I was in a theater company and I was just loving the stage. I just loved the vibe. I loved that adrenaline rush. I loved everything as a young kid getting up on a stage in front of hundreds of people. And it was this really weird out of body experience. Whereas the horses were almost the opposite of that. They were a very internal experience, a very grounding experience, something that was more one on one. And so really, I look at myself. I'm a Gemini. I am definitely the sign of twins. I have two very different people living inside me. One loves the crowd. One loves to be surrounded by people and to be very extroverted. And the other one is very introverted and really enjoys time just spending it alone in the field with my animals. So it's a hard question to answer because I do believe that both of those loves, horses and acting, we're kind of developing at the same time alongside one another. And I do think that both of those skills or those things that I learned growing up fed off each other and helped each other. And then to be able to be cast in a role where I'm working with both horses and as an actor, that's just something that I never in a million years would have dreamed of.
You had these two passions early in life. I know Beth has also had this experience, and I have as well to some extent, where when you have more than one thing that you're really passionate about, especially as a young person, and especially with, you know, a family who might be trying to decide kind of where they also put their attention, where resources are delegated, you know, how you're spending your, you know, precious amount of time after school, or, you know, balancing all of these things so that you also become a well-developed, well-rounded human being. How did you make decisions around where you were going to put your time and energy during that phase where you were kind of trying to decide, as so many of us do at some point, what's going to win out here? Luckily for you, they kind of both won, but you didn't know it was going to turn out that way.
No, you're right. And I think that every horse owner goes through this when they realize horses take up a lot of time. And so if you're
Amen.
doing anything else, it's finding that balance. And because you know it's not, and my dad always joked about this. He's not a horse guy. He always had motorcycles and raced dirt bikes. And he was always like, you know, I can just throw my dirt bike in the garage and I don't worry about it and I don't feel bad for it sitting there for 2 months. And he's like, you got to go out to your horse every day. And like kind of would always just like poke at me about it. And it's true, but at the same time, you don't have a connection with your motorcycle that you do with your horse. So I think that it's worth that extra time that you have to spend and that balance that you have to create. For me, I've loved animals my whole life. I surround myself. I mean, I don't just have horses. I have cows, I have chickens, I have dogs, I have cats, I have peacocks. I have like there's just this menagerie of animals around me because I love it. And I truly feel that that is my full passion. You know, if I could say one thing, if I could give up everything in the world except for animals, I would be very happy. And I think for me, that's also what grounds me. That's what keeps me inspired. That's what gives me new ideas. It's what reinvents me. Like there's so many things about my life that I owe to the animals that have been in my life. And I think as an actor, especially, there's this interesting pressure put on you from the world. I was not just going to say outside of your family, but it is essentially the entire world is looking at you with a certain expectation. And whether we want to say that's true or not, it ultimately is. And I think that animals, they look at you with no expectation. And so for me, again, balancing both those worlds and being able to come to a place where I just feel 100% safe to be myself. I can just go out and sit with my horses, whether I'm just sitting on the ground in the middle of them or going out for a ride or whatever I decide to do that night. And I just feel like I am my true self, as cliche as that sounds. I'm not trying to pretend to be anyone. I'm not trying to say, oh, how did I look when I did that? Or how did I? And I think as an actor, especially growing up in that world, even if we don't want to think about that, like, I don't care how I look, I don't care how, people perceive me, all of those different things, deep down we do. There's this small part of us that is always saying, well, I don't want to put that image out there. And regardless if it's true to who you are or not, you're always going to be judged. And so with horses, I put myself out there and I say, you know what, you can think whatever you want, but they always seem to come back and love me. And I think that relationship and that connection that I've had with animals from when I was very young is what's kept me happy. It's what's kept me kind and grounded and just wanting to be in their presence. And ultimately, that connection allows me to go out into the human world, let's put it that way, and have a truer form of myself and a more confident form of myself because I know that I'm already accepted in my own little herd. So whatever I do out there, it's okay. And if people judge me and if I say the wrong thing or if I say something that somebody wasn't expecting, that's okay because I feel confident in who I am and the relationships that I have at home.
As someone who also plays pretend for a living, that's what horses did for me too. It was the place where I didn't have to pretend. And I've talked about this before, but like I never felt like I fit in Hollywood, and I just wanted to be outside with the animals and no makeup and, all that. And I think that for all of us, no matter what career path you're in, the fact that when we're around animals, we can just truly sink into who we deeply are is like the thing that makes them, everybody says horses are these spiritual beings that bring us back to something bigger than ourselves. And I really think you nailed that right there as to what that is. Just me reflecting on that.
Well, that made me like a little bit misty. My postpartum hormones are not ready for this interview.
And I was like, that's it. That's what I feel like we're all, why do we love animals? Why are we connected? Why do we feel, I think that's it. We don't have to pretend. We just show up.
Sorry, that was incredible. Okay, I want to talk about, there's real life with horses, and then there's like the romanticized, edited version of horses. And I think we have to talk about the difference there because, we're not just talking about Heartland. We're also talking about, what shows up on social media or what show, just when things are curated. Heartland has shaped a lot of the public's perception of horses. What does Heartland get really right about horses? Let's start there.
I think that, as you said, there's always this romanticism. I don't know if that's the right word, but when it comes to horses on screen, we all picture this beautiful unicorn that does everything we say and it listens and it understands how we're feeling. And to a certain degree, horses do listen and they understand how we're feeling. But when they're personified as human traits, that's when we get a little bit into the acting realm. So for Heartland, we try to stay as true to ranch life as we can. We're right in the heart of Alberta ranch country. We're surrounded by, ranch families that have been doing this for over 100 years. So we also have a lot of eyes in the community on what we're doing. So we want to stay as authentic as possible because we don't want people to say, oh, right, that's how it's done.
We've all seen like really bad horse presence on screen for sure.
And so that's the fine line of, okay, we don't want to take it too far that it becomes not believable. But at the same time, if we did it 100% accurately, it would be boring. You
Mm-hmm.
know, anyone who sat
100%.
in
Yes.
a horse clinic for 2 days and knows the speed of which things progress most of the
It's
time
boring.
would not be able to fit that into an hour of television. You know,
Right.
unless we cut and trim and pull all of the very boring watching paint dry moments out, it's not going to be that watchable. And you know, for horse people who can sit in a clinic and actually really get something out of what they're seeing, even though you might be sitting there for 3 days of very little progress, you understand the progress and you understand what's happening. And so you take something from it. But on screen, in a scripted drama, you have to get all of that out, like 4 days worth of clinics in a matter of 10 minutes or less. And
Mhm.
so for us, we use a lot of montages, which really helps. So we've got moments where we show the passage of time, but it's all sped up with a beautiful song so that people stay engaged. And so I always I think of these little Amy Fleming moments of horse training as these little clips of music videos of like, okay, how can we make this interesting and how can we show from point A to point B without losing the interest of our viewers? So ultimately, we're adding that magic by removing all of the little mundane steps that are in between. So it's not like we're creating something that doesn't exist. We're just removing all of the little boring pieces that happen to get there. And so, you know, I always say, yes, Amy is a miracle girl. She can get a horse from wild and crazy, untouched to jumping a full, beautiful course of jumps within, you know, an hour of television. But at the same time, I think the viewers are on that train of, okay, you know, we're showing this time passage. We're showing that maybe it took a little bit longer off screen, and we just
Mhm.
buy into the fact that we're only showing those moments of progression. So to answer your question about, you know, the what we do really well, I think that we showcase a multitude of different horse. I'm not going to say problems, but things that horse owners have come up with and said, you know, this happened and I was able to push past it, but it was a very challenging thing or time with me and my horse. Can you show this? And we'll take different, you know, we have so many different people that have come to us with things that have happened to them in the horse world. And we'll take that. And, you know, sometimes, yes, we have to push it one way or the other just to make it a little bit more exciting or to have more of that story. But a lot of the stories you've seen in Heartland over the years have been true. They've been something that
Mhm.
people have brought us and said, hey, you know, this happened. This might be a good story. And so I think that validating those moments as a horse person that many people have experienced or could experience in the future and be able to say, hey, this happens, like here's a way that you can look at moving past it, or this is something that, you know, you might think is the end of the world, but really it's not. Maybe you just need to do this. And so I believe that we showcase a lot of different disciplines, a lot of different horse breeds, a lot of just things that come up in the horse world. And we're able to show an audience, whether they've been around horses or not, that this is something that has happened and we're going to move on past it.
As a horse person yourself, are there ever times where you've seen something written and you're like, you know what, I think we should tweak that. I think that we should adjust that. And you want to have some input in the way that that story is told so that it's true to the nature of horses or the nature of their, you know, how they progress or what their life is really like.
I would say almost every episode.
Oh,
I'm
wow.
yeah, no, and I say that with the most respect to our
Yeah.
writing team. It's one of those things where I want to be very hands-on with the horse stories because I am one of the very few people in the pre-production side that has
Mhm.
horse experience. And so I'll read through, first I read through the arcs. I kind of flag any major things that I'm like, oh, like how are we, because it's not just about this wouldn't happen, but it's also about how are we going to accomplish this? Because we have access to incredibly trained Liberty horses, you know, there's lots of different things, but there's only so much we can do with a horse and in a safe and, manner that we feel comfortable with. And so there's certain things that I'm like, that's a great story, but I don't know how we're going to accomplish it. How are we going to set that up for success and make sure that everybody is happy and safe doing it? And so there's some tweaks like that. But then, as you said before, there's definitely some things that I read and I'm like, how can we do this to make the horse community on board? Like it's not just about bringing along our viewers that know nothing about horses, because we could probably string them along, so to speak, in a way that they'd be like, oh, that was a great story. That's so cool. But I want Beth to be able to watch the show and say, yeah, that's right. Like I've been there, or I've seen that, or that makes sense to me, as opposed to, oh, come on. We don't want the eye rollers in the horse community to be watching the show. But with that being said, there's things that we just have to figure out as we go. And, we've had multiple different foaling stories on the show. Well, of course, we're not there when there's a mare giving birth. So there's things that we have to do and get creative with camera angles and bringing in like prosthetic fake limbs of foals and things like this, just to make it look as real as we can. Wow. But of course, there's always going to be times where it's like, oh, that maybe, we could have done that a little differently. So I think for myself, I'm very judgmental when I watch the show, because I know how much time is put in ahead of time to try to make it look as authentic and real as possible. But sometimes it comes down to, we'll be shooting, we'll be there, everything's prepped, we plan to do it a certain way, and maybe our Liberty horse doesn't want to play that day. And he's like, oh, you wanted me to lie down? No, too bad. Like it's muddy, or whatever it might be. Like there's things, at the end of the day, these are animals and they understand to a certain degree what we're doing, but we can't really say, hey, we're going to edit this, and whatever you do, can you just do this for 5 minutes and we'll just put it all together? They don't get that. They know what they've been trained to do, and they know they're in a place where they should feel safe and comfortable. But at the end of the day, if they don't want to do it, they're not going to do it. And so I think that's one thing that keeps Heartland really fresh as an actor, because as you probably know, people always say, don't work with kids and animals. Heartland has lots of kids and animals.
A lot of both.
And so that's what's so cool about the show, is that I'm always in improv mode. It doesn't matter what's on the page. If the horse does something differently and we're on the horse, I'm going to adapt to it. And I'm going to say, okay, so like, how can I make this make sense? Like if it's a big wide and it's just going completely the opposite way, well, I'm going to adapt to that so that maybe we can use it. Now, if the horse is off screen and it's, taking a pee over in the corner and I'm supposed to be looking at it with love, I'm still going to be able to maintain my composure and do that. But there's things that you learn over the years on how to make it all piece together, and like, okay, we're only going to use that moment, so that will be fine, and then we just need like an ear flick. Okay, great, we got that. Now let's just go in and get a close shot of the horse licking its lips. We got that. So with the magic of television, we can usually bring all of these little key moments together and make the story. But sometimes you just have to go with what you've got.
Yeah. I'm glad to hear it wasn't all AI horses.
Yeah. No.
I'm glad it was real.
We get asked that quite often.
Do you?
Really?
I was joking, but that's crazy.
Screen.
Wow.
We get asked about
green screen
all the time, because our scenery is so beautiful, and we are actually shooting on those locations, and that's not a backdrop. And so I also count myself very lucky that I get to
another perk of the job.
Film in these beautiful locations.
Yeah, we had a horse on Two Broke Girls in a studio in Warner Brothers in like this tight of an apartment set. It was not as beautiful as Alberta. I'm like, this Heartland seems like the dream horse girl job. Amber, I have a question for you about Amber, the horsewoman's journey. Did you learn to be a better horsewoman on camera through the people you were working with, or were you taking riding lessons on the weekends? Were you training your own horses from, them being young to where they are now? Like, how did you develop as a horsewoman?
I developed a ton through my years on Heartland, because not only was I riding daily and I was around a lot of very experienced people, I was around so many different disciplines. And so for me, I rode Western from when I was 5 to probably 8, and then I started taking just English hunter jumper lessons. Then I got my first horse when I was 12, and I he was a 3-year-old Greenbroke. Shouldn't have bought that horse for my first horse type
Oh,
idea.
tale as
Um,
old as time.
well, and it was because my mom and I went to a horse auction, the two of us, and came home with a horse that was not planned.
Oh, as it
One of
happens
those
a lot of
moments.
times. Yeah.
But you know what? He was incredible. His name was Monty. He was a
Oh,
chestnut quarter horse, 4 white socks, blaze. Like he was just like every girl's dream, right? You're like, wow, this is all mine. And you know what? When we're 12 years old, we bounce way better than we do now. And so I just learned to tuck and roll. Like I was so good at flying off that horse that it didn't even bother me. I would be in a lesson and he would always just throw his shoulder and buck, and I would just roll off and jump back on and away we'd go again, and we worked through it. And that's, I think, one of the most rewarding things is that through that experience and that relationship with that horse, even though my coach was like, why would you buy this new rider a Greenbroke 3-year-old quarter horse? But it also taught me so many valuable lessons. And so I think that that was kind of my intro into the horse world. And then after that, I moved into Western Pleasure. I just, for some reason, we switched barns, and my mom was really good friends with this woman who was doing Western Pleasure. So I went to her barn. I learned that for a year or so. And then I was a teenager, and I was probably not unlike many horse girl stories. I started to get into boys, and the horses started to go out to graze more. And it was one of those things where I think when you're 16 years old and you're like, I've got this party to go to. Like, Mom, can you go make sure my horse is okay? Like, it was kind of this, like, the dividing of two worlds. And one thing that I am so thankful for is that Heartland sucked me right back into that world.
mm.
So I still had my horse when Heartland started, and in the audition, I said, "Hi, I'm Amber Marshall. I have a horse," and instantly they were like, "Oh, good," because everybody said they could ride, but like you never know if that
Yeah,
means they've
nobody
gone on
ever
a
can.
trail ride once. And they're like, "You're the only one that was like, I have a horse," so they're like, "Oh, she must be legit." And so I think that that did help me land the role for sure. But then I was kind of at the point where riding for me was maybe a once a week thing. I wasn't taking it as seriously as I did when my younger teens. And then as soon as I got Heartland, I was like, I got to be a horse girl. Like, I better get back in horse shape. And so it inspired me to get back into it full force. And then I came out to Alberta, which is like ranch country. And, we were surrounded by some of the coolest cowboys ever. And you're like, wow, this is neat. Like, coming from a world where I was a little bit more isolated where I rode, there wasn't a ton of, it was like an English training barn. So there was just a few kids my age. And then I got out here and I was like, wow, the vastness of this horse culture is breathtaking. And what these people do on a daily basis with these horses, they're not just like, for me growing up, I grew up in the city, I boarded my horse, I would go out every day after school. These people live and breathe horses. They wake up, they saddle their horse to go out and check their cows. They call up all their neighbors. They all get together. They move their cows from one pasture to another. Like it's not just a hobby for them. It is their way of life. And I think that was a realization that I didn't even know existed anymore. I was like, this is like what I thought back in time was. Like I didn't know people still used horses on a daily basis to do their job. Like that just was I didn't even think it was in existence. So I think I was very inspired when I came out to Alberta, and I felt an instant connection, not just with the people, but with the place, with the animals. And I instantly felt at home. And that was that was actually at the pilot, but back in season 1, when we thought maybe we'll get 2 seasons out of this show, maybe 3 if we're lucky. We were never thinking 2 decades of the same show continuing. So for me, I think as a horse person, coming out to Alberta from Ontario to be able to just absorb myself in the horse culture with having horse experience but limited knowledge. And then now being on a show where there's incredible trainers that are understanding of all different disciplines and being able to pass on that information to me. And also for me being inspired on weekends. You know, I always had my Saturday, Sunday off. I had nothing to do because here I am just season one, I'm in an apartment back in Calgary. So I'm like, okay, well, I'm going to go out and take some of these cowboys up on their offer to come out and go ride with them, go move cows, learn how to team rope, go just do all of these things. And that really, as a horse person, kind of kicked it into a whole new gear. I was like, wow, this is like, I can see myself doing this forever and living this life.
I remember being a younger rider, and you would order something online, you'd wait like 2 weeks for it to arrive, and then you would open the box and pull it out and look at it like, what is this? It's the wrong size. It's a weird quality. It just felt like a total gamble. That is why Hooves and Paws is such a game changer. They've been in the industry for over 30 years. They have over 100,000 happy customers. And one reviewer said their order was, quote unquote, exactly as portrayed, a perfect experience, which is the dream when you're shopping online. Plus, everything ships free. There's no shipping minimums, and they offer a 365-day money-back guarantee. So you are not stuck with something that you don't want if it doesn't work for you or your horse. You can get all of your riding gear, horse care essentials, and even dog supplies in one place. Go to hoovesandpaws.com and use code HP15 for 15% off. That's hoovesandpaws.com, capital H, capital P, 15 for 15% off your order. What were some of those skills that they were utilizing, these cowboys, that you remember being like, wow, that was not on my radar at all?
At first, I was just blown away by all of it. The fact that, you know, you're riding across not just hundreds of acres, sometimes thousands of acres to go find these cows. And maybe you're in the forestry, you're in like intense bush, and to have a horse that just picks its way through these paths, there's no actual trail there, but you know, they're finding wildlife paths and they're going through and you're ducking, and these horses are so confident in what they do that they know, okay, we're going in here, we've got to find these cows. And you'll see their ears perk up, and it's very much about you listening to your horse because they are so much better with their senses than we are, and going, oh, you know, ears perked up to the right, I'm going to go that way. Oh, there's a cow calf pair. And then you might come around the corner and you find something that needs to be treated. Well, there's no corrals anywhere around. So then you call up your buddy and they come over, you've got ropes. And a lot of people, they would say to me, I don't understand why you have to rope the cow. Like, why can't you just like put it into a stall and treat it? There is no stall for thousands of acres. And so when you have a cow that's got foot rot or that needs to be treated for something, you can't just leave her in pain there. So one cowboy will go up, he'll rope her head, another cowboy will go up and rope the feet. You're on a horse, your horse learns that they just maintain their position. They keep that rope tight, but not too tight, so that you can actually get off your horse, go over and treat that cow, whether it be, you know, giving it a needle, whatever it needs to fix what's happening, and your horse stays there, keeping that rope taut so that you're safe, so that the cow's not moving, and they know, and they just stand there like a soldier. And then when you're all done, you go back, you let the horse move forward, cow stands up, everybody's happy. And it's something that I never would have thought, like, oh, this is an application where these skills and your horse as your partner make a huge difference. Because if you have a horse that is a little unsure, doesn't like cows, whatever it might be, and it's turning and going every which way, well, you're not going to be able to complete the task. So having that connection with a horse that knows its job, understands what's expected of it, makes your job so much easier. So it's just moments like that where I was looking at what was happening and I was looking at the connection between these cowboys and their horses. I'm like, wow, this is a true partnership. You know, you're not just doing one task, you're doing a whole bunch of different things, and you want that horse to just be able to understand and keep up. And it's like, okay, so now we're going to go do this. Oh, and there's no pattern to it. So when you enter a dressage ring, you know exactly what you're going to be doing. You know, here you're going to do this, here you're going to do this. Or even with jumping or many different disciplines, there's a pattern to it. The horse understands what's expected of it. But when you're out in the wilderness and a grizzly bear walks up on you, which I've had before, You don't want your horse
There's no
to freak
playbook.
out and leave you on the ground. You want to know that whatever it is, that your horse is going to remain cool, understand, and look to you for guidance. And I think that's the biggest thing, is having that connection where you trust your horse, but your horse also trusts you to keep them safe. And for you to say, nope, we don't need to freak out. We're just going to turn and we're going to walk up this way. And like I've had some incredible experiences with my horses just riding off from my own property where, we're trotting along and then I look up and there's a whole herd of elk that are running along the hillside.
My God.
And I'm like, let's go. And like kick my horse up and we just run in it. Like I feel like it's like a Lion King moment, right? You're just like,
Oh, that
it's
gives
just
me
something that
chills.
you can't explain to someone. It's this feeling of like this adrenaline and this connection and this partnership between you and this giant being that trusts you to just go do something. And I think that's what horses have always meant for me. It's like, let's go on an adventure. But you know what? I just want to go on an adventure with my horse. Like I'm not someone who loves to do, like, every once in a while, for sure, I'll do like a big group trail ride or something. But for me, it's a very intimate connection. And I want to have that with just me and my horse because, like you said, Beth, there's a lot expected of us in our day-to-day lives, and to be able to have that one being, that one friendship that doesn't expect anything. It's like, let's just go have fun. And so for me, that moment of, running with a herd of elk or stumbling across a bear on a trail or whatever it might be, sometimes your heart is pounding in a good way, like when I was running with the elk. Sometimes your heart is pounding in a very bad way, like, holy shit, what am I going to do when there's a bear in front of me?
Yeah.
But all those moments go back to you and that partnership and that connection that you've established with your horse. And it's like, I trust you, you trust me. We're gonna move through this together.
You got on Heartland, you immersed yourself in this cowboy life, this Alberta way. What was your first step into like making that Amber's life off camera?
It happened so organically that I didn't really know it was happening, but at the same
It
time,
creeps up on you, all these
Yeah.
animals, doesn't it?
and but not just that, but having an understanding that Alberta is where I want to be. So I grew up in Ontario, which is, proximity wise, it's a great travel. It's about 40 hours drive, to put it into kind of context. And so my family was in Ontario. And growing up, I always knew I wanted to live on a farm. Like I would start collecting real estate magazines every time I went into the grocery store or wherever it was. By the age of 6, I would be flipping through them and I'd be circling all the farms and I'd be like, so we can move here, right, guys? Like I was so committed to being a farm girl from a very young age. And I think I just knew that when the time was right, I would be able to make it happen in some way or another. And so coming out to Alberta, I knew I was instantly at home. I just felt like this was my place. But at the same time, I was only here for 6 months of the year to film. And then I was going back to Ontario. So the first 2 years was kind of the transition year of Heartland rented me a condo downtown Calgary. I would escape on the weekends. I made lots of friends in the cowboy ranch world. I was able to kind of get out and ride and do all those things that I love to do. But then soon as we wrapped, I got on a plane and I went back to Ontario. But every time, and that was 2 years in a row that I landed back in Ontario, I didn't feel like I wanted to be there. And in a way where I was so happy to see my family, I was happy to see my friends, but it didn't feel like home. And so I made the decision, season 3, I said, I don't know how long this show's going to go, but even if it only goes this season, I want to try living out here. This is where I feel at home. And so I rented an acreage. So I had 5 acres. I was able to bring a horse out from Ontario. I set up my little, place. I felt very comfortable. We were filming for season 3. I stayed when we wrapped. I just was like, this is where I want to be. So then I started my hunt for a more permanent place. So then by season 4, I had found a beautiful little property. It was 10 acres. It was just enough for me to have all my odd and unusual animals. And that's when I really started to dive into okay, so now that I have my own place, I can bring home all kinds of crazy things. And my chicken population exploded, and I had peacocks, and I had, all like different, like I got given this two old longhorn steers that were just out in my field, like just like random funny farm idea. And I was totally thrown into it because I grew up in the city. And even though I'd had a horse for many years, it's different when you're boarding a horse and you're not 100% responsible for its care. You don't have someone saying, okay, its feet are due, your vet care's due, your deworming's due. So here I am trying to wrap my head around all of this. And this was just at the beginning of season 4 when I started like transitioning into all of this Alberta ranch life. And then I met my husband, Sean. And he grew up on a ranch in Ontario, actually, which is a rarity. So he was an Ontario cowboy. And he was able to make that transition so much easier because he kind of said, hey, yeah, no, I've done this, like, here's some things you can do. And so I kind of learned with his help. Now, the birds, I was completely on my own because he said, you want birds? That's out of my realm. He said, you can learn about that. But all the other big stuff, I think he was such an important part in. And at that time, I had acquired, I bought a weanling buckskin horse named Cash. And so I really relied on Sean to help me with that process too, because I'd kind of had that Greenbrook horse experience, but nothing from bringing a baby all the way up. So I leaned on him a lot. I leaned on a lot of my Heartland Wrangler friends that I'd met over the years. And also just by doing, I think when you immerse yourself in a community, in a culture, in a way of life, and you bring these animals in that, unlike the motorcycle that you can just cover and leave in the garage, they need that daily care and they need you to be present with them. So I think that by doing that and being there every day, you just start to notice things. You're like, oh, you're walking a little different than you were yesterday. Maybe, oh, okay. So just little things that you pick up on your own without having to question it, just by that daily care and that daily routine, I think was really important. And so I think it took me 3 years to fully immerse myself. And then right after that, I was a lifer.
Amber, I am also a farm owner. And so I'm very sympathetic to how much work it is. And I think that the thing, yes, it's a lot of work, but also it's this you feel like Sisyphus half the time, like pushing the barrel up the hill, the rock up the hill, and you're never going to get to the top of the hill. Like there's always something else to be done. And I'm just wondering, your job is it's demanding physically, it's demanding emotionally, it's demanding of your time. Was there ever a time where you just were looking at your life on paper and you were like, is this working? Is this too much for me? Or has it felt easy because it's felt joyful? Some days there's just times where I'm like, I absolutely love my life. I love having my horses at home. I love having all these animals, but I haven't had my nails done since 2018. Some days maybe I just don't want to smell like horse poop. I don't know. Does that ring
No.
true for you at all?
No, I'm a girl that never does my nails. My hands look like
my
I'm
gosh.
80.
I've never done my nails. Even for talk shows, my hair and makeup would be like, you're going on Jimmy Fallon. Are you sure? And I'm like,
oh yeah,
I can't.
No,
I'm going to go ride my horse. It's a waste of money.
Here's a little side story. And this I don't care who knows this, but so I have this really deformed thumb because I slammed it in a door a bunch of times.
Oh, God.
Because every time I close the barn door, it always hits this one spot. And I don't know why, it just always does it. But so when Amy Fleming is on the phone on Heartland, they always look at my thumb and they'll be like, can you turn your hand so we don't see your thumb? This is a thing. Because they're like, no, even though your hands look like you're 80, Amy Fleming is supposed to be this magical character that doesn't actually do physical work, although she pretends to do physical work.
Oh
so
my God.
I think
so true,
for
though.
me, I love the physical work more than anything. And that's what keeps me going. And I know lots of people that go to the gym. I've never been to the gym in my life, but that's 2 hours of their life that I don't have to worry about. Like sometimes I'll
Yeah.
talk to them like, yeah, I was at the gym for an hour and like takes a half an hour to get there, half an hour to get back, and I had a shower and I had this. I was like, that is 2 valuable hours that I
You're
could
like,
be
I did morning
spending
feed. Yeah.
Yeah.
pushing a wheelbarrow up the hill. Like I
Yeah.
feel the things that I do, and I'm not saying I'm in the best shape, but I'm in farm girl shape. Like I'm like, okay, if I need to take a bale out and do this and then go whatever, like I can get it done. And for me, that's the rewarding work. Like I always have people say like, oh, like you must have farm help. You must have people that come out and feed and clean and like, no. Yes, I have farm help because I have a skid steer, which makes things so much easier. So I don't always have to be pushing the wheelbarrow. I can just wheel my skid steer in, clean pens, clean shelters, whatever I need to do. So that is my farm help. So I guess I can't say I don't have any help. I have equipment,
That I don't
which
think that counts. Like that
That
it
doesn't
doesn't
does
count.
count.
though, because,
It does help,
there's
but
certain things that if I didn't have, it would be not as much fun, but
yeah.
those little things make my life so much easier. I can just
Mhm.
bring the skid steer bucket up to my chicken coop, shovel it all in. Well, I'm done in less time than my friend went to the gym. So
Yeah.
there's little things, and also just your setup. Like Sean and I have worked so hard to make a great setup for our animals
Mhm.
that it cuts the time down so much. And our horses, we have 6 horses, but they're out grazing. So they're out in,
Yes.
a big
Yeah.
40-acre pasture where they're playing with each other, they're having fun. So if I don't get to ride them every day, I don't feel bad because they're out
Right.
playing with each other and running around and they seem happy. So for me, I don't feel that obligation. Whereas if I had a horse that was in a stall or a really small turnout, I'd be like, I got to get home so I can ride my horse or
Yeah.
exercise my horse or give them that attention that they need. Whereas when I look out in the field and they're rearing up and biting each other and playing and running around, and I'm thinking, you know what? They're fine. They don't need me today.
Yeah.
They're happy. And I think that that's the case with any animal you have. The better setup you have and more of a replicating a natural environment for them, I think the more content they will be and in turn need you less, which for me is a benefit. I want my animals to need me less. That's not saying that I don't love giving them attention, but I also don't feel bad if I don't see them for a couple days. I'm like, you know what? You guys are doing good. You're having fun. I'm happy. You're happy. That's that's how it goes. I like watching the interspecies connection and how everybody relates to each other because horse owners know that there's always this hierarchy in a herd. We usually know where our horse stands, we can see the different dynamics within that herd. But to be able to see that dynamic between a bunch of different critters running around is really cool. And to see, how the dogs relate to the chickens, to the cows, to the horses, and everything just has this like peaceful coexistence. And for me, that's really inspiring because we look at the world right now and there's so many different opinions, and we can look at ourselves as horses, cows, chickens, ducks, whatever. We're all different, we're all thinking differently. But there's still a place where we can all just coexist peacefully. And I think the biggest thing about this is having space because I notice, if I push all of my animals into one small pen, everybody's biting each other, they're kicking at each other. There's this I don't know, it just the energy level goes way up because all of a sudden they're confined. When they're out in a giant pasture where they can all have the space to have their own place, it's peaceful. And I think we look at this, our cities are getting so busy, so populated. We have traffic jams. We have all of a sudden your energy is just flying up through the roof. Even if you start the day at a very peaceful, calm,
Mhm.
internal place where you're happy with everything around you, all it takes is to put you in a vehicle or a bus or whatever, and you have all these people around you, and you're absorbing all these different energies. And so for me, that's my favorite thing about country living or being able to have the space to go for a walk is that there's no external noise. That's how I just find that peace or that quiet that in a world of hustle and bustle and social media and whatever else, we're immersing ourselves with in the day, I can take those 10 minutes at night, just go for a little walk and feel completely just decompressed and just in a nice place.
Yeah. Amber, I like to ask this question of people who I know get interviewed a lot and are expected to present themselves frequently, like you do, because there's like the interview questions that you get asked, and you're sort of the recipient of this curiosity, but there's not always the space for you to bring up what you want to talk about. And so just in closing, is there something that you are rarely asked about that you wish that you had the opportunity to speak about more?
I find myself, as you've learned in the last hour or however long we've known each other, I really like to expand my answers and take them in a direction that I love, like that I want people to understand what I love about whatever topic it is we're talking about. And so I found a way over the years, because you're right, like there's so many different repetitive questions that you're asked. And sometimes I'm like, okay, well, I've been asked that 100 times. I've answered it 100 times. But for me, what truly makes me happy and what brings me joy, I want to be able to share. And so it finds a way of getting out anyway. So I guess that would be, I don't have anything specific that I want to share, but I think throughout this interview and the questions that were asked, I find a way to follow that river and just let people in on the ride and say, this is something that brings me happiness, and I'm going to share that. And if there's a way that you can absorb any little bit of that river ride, then hop on, because I think that there are so many things in life that bring us joy, but a lot of people are too busy to see it, and they don't take that time to step back and say, what does make me happy? How can I push further towards that thing, as opposed to getting swept up in the current and being dragged out to sea when, they might want to be inland. And I don't know, I like to live my life as it happens. I'm not someone who makes a ton of like far off distant goals. I like to make my goals for that week or that month and accomplish little things as they go, because I find if you're too focused on something in the distant future, you might miss so many other opportunities that have happened and that are existing around you every day. And I believe that you should live your life as it flows and not try to put resistance on it. And if you're meant to see certain opportunities, if you kind of just slow down a little bit and take time to watch out for them, then you might be led exactly where you're supposed to be.
Oh, that's awesome.
That's a
cool.
actionable
That was a really
pull quote there. That is a
perspective.
beautiful perspective, and so true, because we miss, even Caroline and I talk a lot about this as mothers.
I needed that reminder today.
I did
Thank
too.
you.
And especially in our business, Amber, a lot of people ask, like, I just ended a show, so what's next? Like, what now? Like, are you going to go on to a new show? Even like friends and family, I'm constantly being asked, and I'm like, I don't know. I genuinely don't know, and I'm trying to stay open. And so it's a good reminder too, it's okay to tell people I'm living in the moment and taking it a week at a time with small actionable steps and goals that I can finish today.
Yeah. And I think that for me, that makes me feel so much more accomplished, because I can wake up and I like lists. I'm kind of a list person. So I try to wake up every morning and I'll write down all the things I want to get done in the day, or I use my calendar on my phone each weekday. I'll say, oh, I got to do this today. I got to do this tomorrow. I got to do this the next day, just so that I can check them off and know just where I'm someone who's lived by a call sheet for most of my life. So I like to be, I said to our AD last year, I was like, can I just hire you to write me a daily call sheet? Like I really need someone to keep me on track, because I'll go through the whole day and then I'll be like, did I eat lunch? No, I didn't eat lunch. Oh, did I? Like, there's so many things and the day just gets going and busy. And then at the end of the day, I'm like, okay, so what did I accomplish today? Which is why I like my daily lists.
Okay, so these are some listener questions we got. This is a funny one. Who is more dramatic, horses on set or actors on set?
Actors are always more dramatic than the horses.
Always. We're the worst. Although it does seem like you have a pretty rockin' set, which we did on the neighborhood too. We had like no divas, and it was such a great environment, which is why I think shows last. I mean, we only lasted 8, not 20, but I do think that that's a reason probably the show has lasted so long.
Oh, for sure.
Okay, what's the most horse person thing about you that fans might not expect?
Oh. See, I think fans expect a lot from me now because they have been following me for so many years and they see things I post.
Okay, can I ask one?
Yes.
Do you put your saddle pads in the washing machine?
Oh, that's a good one.
No,
This
because
is an
I have
ongoing
the
debate in
giant,
my
house.
I have giant felt pads that don't fit in my washing machine, so I hose them
right.
and then use a
okay.
scraper. But if I had like an English saddle pad, for sure I would put it in the washing machine. I put all my dirty dog blankets in the washing machine, and I foster dogs, so they are not nice. Like there's a lot of things on there that you probably don't want to wash with your clothes, but I hose them off first usually, and then I throw them in there.
It's okay. There's no shame here.
No.
I have
Kids are disgusting.
poop
Their
goes
clothes
in the
go
wash
in the
sometimes.
washing
It
machine.
happens.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay, what is your favorite discipline to ride personally?
I like just riding out Western,
Like
just
adventure
no,
riding.
yeah, like
Yeah.
no agenda, no, like, okay, I've got to accomplish this today. Let's just go explore. Let's go. I like having time with my horse where we can just do what we want and we don't have to have a certain program or accomplish anything by the end of the day. It's just like, let's just go have fun.
Awesome. A horse that challenged you the most?
I've had a few. I think that my very first horse, Monty, for sure challenged me because I was brand new to horses. I was brand new to, like, I was 12 years old, so I was trying to figure this out. And then I had a horse that was also trying to figure things out. So together, the two of us were leaning on each other, but neither of us knew what the expectations were. And so it was definitely challenging. And he was the horse that kind of made me understand you have to be so careful with your cues and to understand what their cues are too, because you might be telling them something that they don't understand, and then they're trying to tell you they don't understand. But if you don't understand, they don't understand, then nobody understands. So that's kind of one of the key lessons I learned right off the bat, is to be, and with all animals I found, the consistency of it is so important, and following through on what you're asking. Because if you ask something and the horse doesn't do it and then you don't follow through, well, then you're just telling them that what you said didn't mean anything. And so then they don't trust what you say next, because they're like, well, I don't get it. So I think with all animals, just the consistency aspect of it is so important, and following through with what you're asking.
Beautiful. And last question, favorite horse book or movie growing up?
Oh,
I know that's hard.
I loved a lot. Actually, I loved all the original, like the original Flicka, I used to watch like a lot of the 1950s. I think that's when it came out, like early on. I also loved the original Black Stallion, or was it Black Beauty? Black Stallion. Just that beach scene for me was like this look
Black
into
Stallion.
was the look into liberty, which I now get to do on screen. So I'm just living out my childhood dreams. But it is really cool to be able to watch something and then think about, like, being an actor, it's like, how did they accomplish that? And those were things that I was thinking. I was like, that's so magical. Like, I want to be able to do that. And then flash forward to my Amy Fleming days of running around at Liberty with a black horse. Here I am. Maybe I just envisioned that long enough that I made it happen. But it's pretty cool to be able to do those things.
Amber Marshall, thank you.
Amber Marshall, thank you so much. This was amazing.
Thank you so much for listening to Horse Person and giving me a little bit of your precious time and brain space. I I hope you found something in this episode that fed your curiosity or gave you a new perspective or a new tool, or maybe just a little inspiration to keep going on the journey that you're on. If you want to support the show, please share it with your friends and family, share it on social media, and leaving a 5-star rating and review on Apple Podcasts or Spotify is extremely helpful to helping this show grow. And also showing our sponsors some love as well and telling them that you heard them on Horse Person. That is so helpful and will help this show grow and expand and serve you better over time. And finally, if you have a topic that you want to hear, send me an email. My email is caroline@horsepersonpodcast.com. See you next time.